So imagine what life would be like if you couldn't trust anyone's word. You'd buy a new car only to discover down the road that you'd been lied to about the car's history. Leaders would speak words not to get the truth heard, but to get re-elected or to get out of some difficult situation that they're in. People would say misleading things about you and your group in the media. Unfortunately, we're probably not imagining it. We are remembering it, thinking of instances. How about ourselves? How truthful are we? Does our yes mean yes and no, no? Children tend to go through a phase where they experiment with whether truth stretching can help them stay out of trouble or make them look better than what they actually are. Hopefully, for us who are no longer children, that got socialized out of us. Hopefully. Or did lying become a successful strategy that is still handy on occasion for us? Supposedly, a minister told his congregation, "Next week I plan to preach about the sin of lying. To help you understand my sermon, I want you all to read Mark chapter 17. The next Sunday, as he prepared to launch into his sermon, the minister asked for people to raise their hands if they had read Mark 17, and several hands went up. He smiled and he said, "Mark has only what, Dave? 16 chapters. Now I will proceed with my sermon about lying." So for several Sundays, we've been looking at the section of Scripture, the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus gives a series of 6 teachings, each beginning with, "You have heard that it was said, but I say unto you." We might think that the one that we're looking at this morning, Matthew chapter 5, 33 to 37, on truth-telling, is not as weighty as the others. I mean, the others deal with murder, adultery, divorce, loving our enemies. But this one actually is very weighty, very important, because life involves a lot of speaking. And the trustworthiness of what people say is vitally important. Our whole world, our quality of life, takes quite a hit when we can't trust what is said about a new car, about a transaction. So our society takes great pains to try to get people to speak the truth. One tool that we use is the oath. As somebody gives testimony in court, for instance, they're asked to raise their right hand and say, "I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." And we create a distinction between speaking under oath and normal speech. Lying under oath in our society has severe legal penalties. Other lies, and this is something that Jesus wasn't quite sure about. I think this is what led to this section. Other lies, our society would say, are not quite so serious as lying under oath. Oaths have been around a long time. They're definitely not something that our society came up with. The ancient civilizations all had them. Old Testament Israel had them. To guard against our bent as humans toward lying, they would make the person say, God is my witness that I am telling you exactly what happened, or that I will keep my promise that I'm making to you now. And in a world where people believed in God or in the gods, that they could be judged, that the gods could avenge them if they break something said in the God's name, well, then the oath indeed would help confirm what was said. In a society like ours where the sacred isn't viewed as real, oaths are often not, I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God, but rather, I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury. The penalty of perjury, lying under oath, is severe, and so it adds weight to that oath. So that was a little introduction to oaths. Perhaps all of you already knew it, but anyway, now I know that you do. So that's oaths. Now we want to look at what Jesus' attitude was toward oaths in our text. Did Jesus look positively on them? It seems to me that Jesus was looking at the long-term impact that oaths have on everyday truth-telling. An oath, just think about it, an oath by its very nature implies the untrustworthy character of the one who is using that oath. I mean, using an oath can imply that when not using an oath, you very well might be lying. You often can't trust me, but this time you can because I'm using an oath. So, in a sense, you could say oaths almost authorize the common lie. It makes people assume that there are two kinds of statements. Those given under oath, and those are truthful, and those without an oath, and those might not be truthful. You know, they should be, but they might not be. And Israel in Jesus' day added more twists to this. Jesus, in our text, refers to them swearing by heaven, or swearing by the earth, or by Jerusalem, or by our own head. Their oath-taking had evolved into something with all kinds of levels. See, one of the 10 Commandments is don't take God's name in vain. And so to make sure that they didn't, Israel would often try to not even say God's name. Because if we didn't say the name, then we weren't going to, use his name in vain. So they ended up with an elaborate system of oath-taking where they would come as close as they could to saying God's name without actually saying it. They would say things like, I swear by heaven that I have just said the truth to you. Or, I swear by the temple in Jerusalem that I caught an 18-pound bass down by the Sea of Galilee. They were still invoking an oath, but maybe not one quite as serious if they would break it. Well, into this world of constant oath-taking, implying I might be dishonest if I'm not swearing an oath, comes Jesus. And he says, this whole system is unhealthy. Let's nip the idea that you don't have to be as truthful when you're not using the oath. Let's get rid of it, that idea, by not having oaths at all. Matthew chapter 5:34, I say to you, do not take an oath at all. Jesus also, right after that, he goes on to point out the ridiculousness of oaths that substitute something for God. He says, everybody knows what you mean when you say heaven. And when you invoke Jerusalem, you're again invoking the aura of God. And even when you swear by your own head, you have not left God behind, for your physical life is not really your own. Even then, you are in fact invoking God. So Jesus says, just have your yes mean yes, and your no mean no. Be truthful every time you speak, which eliminates the need for swearing an oath. God intends for those around us to be sure of the truthfulness of what we just said, because we are truthful all the time. Now here's the $64,000 question. Is Jesus establishing a new law against oath taking? Something that you've heard me say several times the last Sundays, we tend to read these passages in Matthew 5 as Jesus establishing new laws. You know, Matthew 5:22, he says, don't call somebody a fool. So is that a new law? Or Matthew 5:29, gouge out your right eye if it causes you to sin. Is that a law that Jesus is giving? Or always turn the other cheek, Matthew 5:39. There are indications in all those instances that Jesus is not giving a new law. He's more filling our moral imaginations with possibilities, giving us things to weigh. But is this different? When Jesus says, do not take an oath at all, is he giving this as a new command? Well, James gives a strong indication that this is a command. James chapter 5, verses 12 and 13 says, but above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. Notice how strong James makes that. At the beginning, he says, above all. In the middle, he says, or by any other oath. This is comprehensive. And then at the end is this warning of condemnation. It sure seems that James viewed do not make any oath at all as a command. And in the early church, for 300 years, almost without exception, Jesus' command against oaths was taken literally. Until Constantine, until Christianity became a state religion. Then most church leaders switched to saying you could use oaths when oaths are required by the state. And that's the majority opinion in the Christian church today. Most Christians today, Jesus was only against oaths in our everyday relationships, but not against oaths before courts. So what should we do? Should we go with the early church? Should we go with most Christians today? It's not simple to answer that. One of the one of the things that sort of makes it complicated is that it does appear that Paul, the Apostle Paul, did attest to the truth by an oath, by invoking God. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 23, this is the New Living Translation. I call upon God as my witness that I am telling the truth. And then Galatians 1:20, I declare before God that what I am writing to you is not a lie. So I would guess that this whole question, should we refuse oath-taking, is not something that we should get a lot bent out of shape over. There is a whole lot of disagreement. You know, it's hard to weigh things. But I would also guess that Jesus' teaching here might make us want to have no need for oath-taking. To be so well known for telling the truth that we have no need for oaths. Here it comes again. To have the reputation that the whole of our speech, as ones who are following Jesus, letting Jesus' life flow out of us. And Jesus always, as Brianna said, spoke the truth. He never spoke something that he regretted. Well, I really shouldn't have said that. As we are following Jesus, may we, like him, be transparently honest all the time. May it be the case that our simple yes is equivalent to somebody else's whole string of oaths. And I would guess that when we are in court, we might want to affirm rather than swear an oath. Now, what am I meaning by that? Well, thankfully, in our country, as well as in many countries today, that is an option. We are allowed to request to affirm rather than to swear. And that's almost always respected when we request that. And this is not just due to the conscience of all the Jesus followers in the country, but also respecting atheists' concern. They do not like the idea of, that I have to say, so help me God. So they just want to affirm under the penalties of perjury. So when you find yourself in a position where you have to swear an oath, whether it's you're a witness in court, you're a jury member, or as a requirement to accepting some government employment or whatever, you can let the official administering the oath know in advance that you wish to give an affirmation rather than to swear an oath. Grab that as an occasion to just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Now, I want to give some closing comments on not going overboard as we let our yes be yes and our no be no. This may surprise you, but there are times God allows us to have our yes not mean yes. What am I saying here? When somebody greets you with the socially expected, "How are you?" it's okay to say fine sometimes, even if you're not fine. You don't need to lay the heavy burden of truth-telling on that casual social interaction. When they ask, "How are you?" it's essentially them saying hi. So your fine doesn't need to mean fine unless the person asking, "How are you?" knows you well, and you can tell by looking into their eyes that they really are wondering how you're doing today. they're aware, that you are going through some stuff, and they're caring about how you are, then if you're not fine, you shouldn't say fine. Another instance when maybe God allows your yes to not mean yes. When your daughter gets a new dress and she is obviously pleased with it, but you don't really like it. If she asks your opinion, do you have to send her into tears? You should say as much truth as love lets you. We've heard Jimmy Carter in the news. He's on hospice now. Will not be with us on this earth long, probably. Jimmy Carter is one who fervently tries to follow Jesus, and he developed quite a reputation for honesty in his life. And that was something that people were curious about while he was president. One time, a television reporter grilled Carter's mother, Miss Lillian, on it. "Is it true," asked the reporter, "that your son doesn't lie? Can you tell me that he has never told a lie?" "Well, I reckon that he might have told a little white lie now and then," replied Miss Lillian. The reporter thought she spotted an opening. "I thought he didn't lie. Are you telling me that white lies aren't as bad as black lies? Just what do you mean by a white lie?" "Well," drawled Miss Lillian, "do you remember when you came in this morning and I told you how nice you looked and how glad I was to see you?" So I'm saying this just to help you relax a little bit, but not too much. We have to be careful here. It's very dangerous to allow exceptions to truth-telling, because we as sinful people can so easily rationalize sin. We can see a loophole and drive a Hummer through it. So don't get focused on the exceptions. Focus on the heart of what Jesus is saying. In our text, he started out, "You've heard it said, do not break your oath." And they had heard that in places like Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. But then I think Jesus went on to talk about God's real concern. God's real concern is truth. It's not just us keeping our oaths. God wants us to be truthful in all of our words, all of our dealing. Jesus is saying, speak every word, knowing we are in God's world. We are standing in God's presence. We are not just speaking to that person. We are speaking in the presence of God. We should be speaking and acting as though we are never off the witness stand. Because we never are. The judge of all the world is right there as we are speaking, as we are acting. And as we do that, then people trust us. Then people know our honesty. And we have no need for more words than yes or no. We don't need an oath to help someone believe what we are saying.